morning, everyone. My name is Frank Jaskulke. I'm the Vice President of Intelligence at the Medical Alley Association, and I'm so thankful that you chose to join us on this fine Friday morning in Medical Alley. We have a fantastic discussion coming up today on a market that is so critical to the Medical Alley community and to the medical device industry, both as a market to bring products into, as well as a hub of innovation that has brought many technologies to the US and many companies to Medical Alley, like Smiths Medical. We've got a great group of speakers today. They're going to share their perspective on what's going on in the new regulatory environment, some of the innovation programs, and opportunities for companies in Medical Alley to develop new partnerships and bring new products to market. As we're going through this webinar, just a couple of things, a little bit of housekeeping stuff. So for those of you that are the guests, the attendees today, you'll see the speakers as they're talking. If you have questions, please use the Q&A function, not the chat function. It'll make it a lot easier for us to track down the questions and make sure that our moderator is able to get them to the speakers. So again, use the Q&A function, not the chat function. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available both as a webinar and as a podcast after this. So if you aren't able to see the whole thing, or you have colleagues that should see the content, please know that it will be sent out. It will be available for sharing, and we encourage you to share it with others. And the last thing I'll say is if you have ideas for future content, topics we should be discussing, everything we do comes from you, the Medical Alley community. So please reach out to me or anyone else on the Medical Alley staff and share your ideas. And so with that, I'm going to get the program started. We're going to start with a wonderful special guest, Alan Gogbashian, who is the British Consul General based in Chicago for the UK government. He's a longtime partner of Medical Alley in the Medical Alley community. Alan, I'll turn it over to you if you'd give us a quick welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, Frank, for that introduction. And good morning, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you here today. I'm looking forward to what I'm sure will be a very interesting discussion. As Frank said, I'm the Consul General for the United Kingdom based in Chicago. And from the consulate here, we oversee the UK's relationship with 14 states. That's all of the Midwest, including, of course, Minnesota, as well as Colorado and Kentucky. And a large part of our work is promoting economic ties between the Midwest and the United Kingdom. So we are here to support you if you want to increase your trade with the UK, or if you want to consider investments into the UK. Please do consider us as your support and your resource alongside the UK government office that we have in Minnesota. I would like to express my thanks to Medical Alley for hosting today's event. And I'd particularly like to recognize the sustained leadership that Medical Alley has shown since 1984, which has made such a tremendous impact in cementing Minnesota's place as a world-class center of medical excellence and innovation that persists to this day. And the British Consulate's very proud to have been a member of Medical Alley for over 4 years. And in addition to the consulate in Chicago, as I said, we're represented in Minnesota by our UK government office, headed by Jan Bauer. I'd like to recognize Jan, she's here today. And Jan is your first point of contact in facilitating connections between Minnesotan MedTech industries and the United Kingdom. Minnesota really matters to the UK. Minnesotan exports to the UK in 2019 totaled over $1.7 billion. And the trading relationship also supports thousands of jobs in the state. Over 21,000 Minnesotans, we estimate, are employed by UK companies as of 2018. In 2020, Minnesota exported over $160 million in medical and pharmaceutical products to the United Kingdom. So there's already a very strong trading relationship, but we would like to see it go even deeper. A strong US-UK free trade agreement, we believe, can help take us to the next level. And we've started negotiations of that free trade agreement. They began last May. They carried on virtually all the way up till the US elections. And we were very pleased with the progress that we made. Over half of the text and over half of the chapters in the FTA had already been agreed. And now that we have a new administration and a new US trade representative in the US has been confirmed, we stand ready to continue to negotiate to pick up where we left off and hopefully achieve an ambitious and comprehensive agreement that works for both countries and that works for the medical industry. I'm confident that an ambitious free trade agreement will open doors to increased UK-Minnesota business in the medical field, not least through the mutual recognition of professional qualifications, which could benefit companies on both sides of the Atlantic and improve the ease of doing business. In the meantime, cooperation between the US and UK in the life sciences area is a daily reality. We've been cooperating on the scientific response to COVID-19, and that response will feature, of course, prominently during the G7 summit to be held in Cornwall, England in June, which President Biden will attend. Minnesotan companies, of course, have played a prominent role in the COVID response, stepping up to the plate and producing and distributing critical PPE that's protected and saved lives in the UK. So thank you very much again for joining. Please do bear us in mind, both the government office in Minneapolis and the consulate in Chicago. We work hand in hand together to help facilitate your relationship, your trading partnership with the UK, and we'd love to be that resource for you. So please do get in touch if you have any questions or if we can help you in any way at all. Thank you.
Alan, thank you. The special relationship between the UK and the US, I think, continues even more strongly among the medical technology industry. We're now to get started with the program, but just before we do, quick reminder again, use the Q&A function if you have questions. And also remember, we're like a year and a half into this whole Zoom thing. We're mostly at home. Real life does happen, so please have empathy if a cat shows up on the screen or anything like that happens. I'm going to turn it over to Graeme Tunbridge to get us started. Graeme is the Director of Devices at the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. Graeme, if you would introduce yourself and kick us off today.
Thanks very much, Frank. And just to pick up on that point, it's almost certain that it's 3:10 in the afternoon in the UK, and that's after school time. It doesn't matter how many rules I write for my daughter not to come in at this time, she will almost certainly come in. So I apologize in advance that you'll probably get that at some stage. So you said I'm Director of Devices at the MHRA. Let's go with that, because otherwise we'll spend the entire time spelling out the acronym in the UK. And we're an organisation that's focused on the safety and quality of healthcare products on the UK market, and we're the regulatory agency for the UK. It's a really exciting time for us. Obviously, the post 1st January world is a very different world, and we're talking about some of the challenges that brings, but also I think the exciting thing to talk about this afternoon is a lot of the opportunities that brings. I'm really pleased to be here today. I was delighted to be invited, and I'm looking forward to a really interesting, stimulating discussion. So over to Peter to say hello.
Thank you very much, Graeme, and good morning, everybody in America. Good afternoon to Graeme. I'm delighted to be here as well. My name's Peter Groves. I work as a consultant interventional cardiologist at the University Hospital of Wales in Cardiff, Wales. So I am a clinician. I have academic honorary professorships at the University of Cardiff, but also in London at the William Harvey Cardiovascular Research Institute, which is part of the Queen Mary University, London. So I have an academic interest in medical device innovation and involved myself in the innovation programs in both those two universities. But I also work with other elements within the healthcare system. So for 15 years, I've worked with NICE. I'm sure you'll be familiar with that organization. And for 6 years with MHRA, and in both in a professional advisory capacity. So at NICE, I recently came to the end of a 5-year tenure as chair of the Medical Technology Advisory Committee, and that's a committee responsible for identifying and then producing research based recommendations about medical device technologies that are going to be of benefit to patients, but also to the healthcare system. So I chaired that committee for 5 years. At the MHRA, where I work very closely with Graeme and his colleagues, I chair the Devices Expert Advisory Committee, and that's a committee responsible for providing professional advice to the MHRA and also academic and strategic advice in terms of their decision-making around medical device regulatory issues. A bit closer to home, I'm chairman of Health Technology Wales, which is a health technology assessment organisation that is funded by Welsh Government and responsible for promoting the adoption in Wales, very specifically, of innovative medical devices that are going to be of benefit to patients in the system. So taking a broad look at my experience, I suppose in some ways I have experience and expertise throughout the life cycle of medical devices, all the way from the innovative academic interest in device development, through the regulatory aspects, which I've touched on with NICE and MHRA, through also the implementation and adoption considerations with all of those organizations, but also finally also as a healthcare professional who implants medical devices into my patients, into their hearts on a daily basis. So in regard to the meeting this afternoon, I'm delighted to be part of the panel. What I hope to bring are the insights of a healthcare professional working in the UK NHS system who has professional advisory roles with different organizations within the system. I'd like to bring my professional insights into the discussions, talk a bit about how UK is supporting medical device innovation within the system, and also perhaps what some of the opportunities may be for life sciences companies and industry, in my experience, to perhaps join us in realizing some of our aspirations. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Excellent. Well, thank you both, Graeme and Peter. Hello, everyone. I'm Megan Brandt, and I will be moderating on behalf of Medical Alley for today's program. Just as another reminder, please submit your questions for our panelists using the Q&A function field below. I do see a few rolling in, so please keep them coming. And so to kick things off, let's start talking about the current regulatory status in the United Kingdom. Graeme, I'll direct this first question to you to start. So now that the UK has officially left the European Union, how does that affect the status of the medical device regulation? Will the MDR and then also the IV or in vitro device regulation be recognized in the UK?
Okay, so I can cover that, Megan, and I know there's a few other questions around this, so I might try and pick up a few at the same time, because the answer is kind of multifaceted, but we'll get there. So the immediate change, hopefully it hasn't felt too different, I imagine, from the 31st of December to the 1st of January. Obviously that's the official exit of the UK from the European Union. But the initial step that we've taken is one to simply roll over the existing EU rules into UK law. And the route to market in the UK is currently through the existing route, CE marking. And manufacturers can continue to get access to the UK market through the use of CE mark. We've also opened up an additional route to market through what's called the UKCA Mark, which is a separate conformity assessment route that goes through approved bodies in the UK. At the moment, that's based on the existing European directives in UK law. So we've got effectively two routes to market at the moment. The main additional thing that companies will have noticed, and the main step that is different, is that we've introduced a requirement for companies to register with the MHRA. And we've introduced a requirement for companies to have what we're calling UK responsible person, so some sort of legal presence in the UK to allow them to fulfill some basic duties. The reason we've done that is because as we've left the European system, we relied on that system as a whole to provide us knowledge of what was on the European market. We're not part of that system anymore, so we need to understand from a UK perspective what that looks like. Hopefully, it's a relatively light touch administrative step. It doesn't cost a great deal of money. It's £100 to register as many products as you can get onto one particular electronic form, and off you go. And so that's the situation for the next 2.5 years. After 2.5 years, so after July 2023, that's when the more substantial changes will be coming into to the UK system. I can talk about what those might look like perhaps in a minute, because there's obviously some elements to that. But in answer directly to your question that you asked, Megan, about the MDR and IVDR, we'll continue to allow CE mark products on the UK market for the next 2.5 years, so until July 2023. So MDR and IVDR compliant products will continue to be accepted. The important point is that we won't be transposing, so we won't be applying equivalent rules to the MDR and IVDR in UK law through that separate route to market through the UKCA route. And what we're going to be doing over the next year or so is putting together the rules, the position, the legal instruments, the guidance that's needed to set out what the UK system is going to look like outside of Europe, and one in which we're not implementing the IVDR and MDR.
Okay, great. And so I have another follow-on question just to build off of what you were saying. So if you continue to recognize CE mark for the next 2.5 years, at what point will companies need to register with the MHRA?
So the registration requirements are tapered in over the course of this year. So high risk products have actually not terribly long to register up until the end of April. So high risk products end of April, medium risk products to end of August, and then all products should be registered with the MHRA by the end of the year. So that's the timescales that we're looking towards. There's lots of guidance online, and actually as IT registration systems go, it's not a bad one. We've done a reasonably good job with it. There's a few teething issues, but you always get that. But hopefully it's a relatively light touch and straightforward process.
Excellent. All right. So what will then, I think you had touched on this briefly with the UKCA Mark. So you mentioned that there are now kind of a process to go through approved parties. Can you build upon that process a little bit more based off of kind of what has been established to date?
Sorry. Say that one again, Megan. Sorry, I was.
So the process for the UKCA Mark. So. Yeah. If a company would want to apply for that now, can you maybe expand a bit more on what that process looks like?
Yeah, of course. So that process is going through the approved bodies in the UK. So approved bodies is the new name in the UK for what were notified bodies in the EU system. So these are conformity assessment bodies based in the UK with a formal status being recognised by the MHRA to be able to issue that UKCA certification. So the two bodies that can do, well, there are three bodies in the UK that can do it at the moment. That's BSI, SGS, and UL. They're all big conformity assessment bodies. You'll recognise those names, and those are the bodies that you'd want to go to go through the UKCA certification route. Clearly, it's an option at the moment. It's an either or. You can go for the CE mark or you can go for the UKCA mark. At the moment, most companies will continue to want to use the CE marking route for obvious reasons, because that gets you access to the UK and the broader European market. Obviously, when we design the future system, the routes will have to take account of the role that UK bodies will play in issuing the UKCA mark, because after July 2023, the UKCA route is the only route to market, albeit will look very different to just mirroring what's happening in Europe, if that makes sense, Megan.
It does. Thank you. And so what if companies are currently in a clinical stage, so they do not yet have a product to market? At what point would they need to register?
So they'll need to register when they're placing the products on the UK market. So that's the point of registration. They need to appoint the UK responsible person and register with the MHRA, and that's it's the point at which you're starting to sell the product into the UK.
All right, and I've got one additional question here just around the process. So when will the UKCA Mark and the authorized rep in the UK be required on the product labeling?
The answer is, at the moment, there is no answer to that. Clearly, we recognize that there is labeling is always, I can't get through a talk about future regulation without talking about labeling. Labeling is one of my favorite topics to talk about. We will need to recognize the lead-in times for changes to labeling, changes to product markings, what's sensible and what's achievable when it comes to setting up what happens after July 2023. So there won't be a guillotine, there won't be ridiculously short deadlines. There will be a recognized, sensible transition, and we'll also be thinking about how can we move beyond the notion that the most useful way of doing conformity marking is physical marks on products, physical marks on product labels, things written in instructions. Yeah, I think there are, as part of the UK system, we can talk about this in a little bit, is how can we do things from a regulatory sense in a different way that is useful to patients and consumers, people using the products, but also lessens the burden on companies and lessens the cost, because we're not interested in just simply saying we're going to replicate the EU system, or we're going to replicate the FDA system in the UK, because we recognize that we are a relatively smaller market. We recognize that companies have a bigger world they want to be selling into, and that we will fit in a part of that.
Excellent. And so I've got another question here from the audience. So do you anticipate the UKCE or CA approval being faster than the CE Mark process at the moment, given the delays with notified bodies in the EU?
So I will. I'll look to the future. So maybe this is quite a good opportunity to talk about the kind of what the future world looks like, because in the intervening 2.5-year period, in all likelihood, the UKCA process will look and feel a lot like the EU process, because it's based on the same legislation. It's the same bodies doing it. I'll talk about maybe some of the things that we're thinking about is going to come after July 2023 to get market access to the UK from a regulatory perspective. So I think the first thing to say is that, and I think it was also in the Q&A as well, is that we were heavily involved in developing the MDR and IVDR, and there's lots of good things in there, and there are lots of things in there that we will want to replicate in the UK. You know, it is stepping up the level of patient safety. It's stepping up certain things that we want to see. However, the MDR and IVDR are solutions for a market of a number of different member states with notified bodies that need tight control, and it looked to solve some of the problems that come with operating in that European system. When you operate in a different system, in a system where you've got a single country determining market access for that country, I think you can operate in quite a different way. So some of the things that we'll be looking to do in the future system will be to say, well, we don't want to start from scratch for everything. If you've got CE marking, if you've got approval from the FDA, then that is going to be a way that you can satisfy a number of the requirements that we'd have as a regulator. So in effect, that would shortcut your route to market with another regulatory approval. We're looking to be involved in broader international programs. So the MDSAP program is a good example of one. We're now an observer at IMDRF in our own right. We're now an observer on MDSAP, and we're looking to see how we will be able to incorporate MDSAP as a program, but also some of the broader international principles in what we do as well. I'm also really, really keen that we don't end up in the same situation that Europe's ended up in, the situation with notified bodies, where companies go to a notified body and they cross their fingers and they say, goodness me, I hope it's not going to cost me an arm and a leg, and goodness me, I hope I can get this done in a reasonable timescale. And just that sense that people have of, it's timeless, it's costless, I don't know what's coming here. So the idea that we can provide a system that has a degree more certainty to it, and that companies can have a sensible dialogue with approved bodies, with the MHRA, with everyone in the room, in a way that is very different to how the European system is going down the road. It's no coincidence that many innovations now are launching in the US because companies like being able to speak to the FDA. They like the certainty that the FDA processes have, and that's something that's being lost in Europe, and we're keen to reinstate that in the UK.
Excellent. So I'm maybe going to just switch gears for a minute, and I'm going to direct a question at Peter, because we're getting some additional questions in. So before we get to the questions, Peter, can you explain the role that NICE plays in getting innovative technologies to patients?
Thank you, Megan. Yes, a very good question. So, I mean, we know, of course, that the delivery of innovation from the concept to clinical reality is a very complex one. It's a multi-stage process. It's a kind of end-to-end process that involves lots of different elements. So it's important to kind of think of NICE as part of that process. We are a health technology assessment organization that is based on producing evidence-based recommendations, and that's really important to remember, evidence-based recommendations that identify for safe innovations the potential for clinical benefits to patients, but also potentially the case for cost effectiveness. So directing the system, in a sense, to the best utilization of resources. So NICE undertakes technology assessments in a number of different programs, and has methods and processes that ultimately culminate in guidance recommendations that, in a sense, alert the system to how they should go about making their decisions in terms of what they provide to patients. NICE is very aware that within the innovation space, it must do that job in a way that does not slow down momentum. So I think that's a really important new focus for NICE, is that historically, perhaps some of the processes have taken some time, have been quite protracted, but the focus is very much now within NICE to kind of shortcut a lot of the work that we do, and to try and make sure that kind of passage from concept to clinical reality is facilitated rather than slowed down. And this is a very good week to be talking, because on Monday, NICE launched its strategic plan for the next 5 years. And it identified within that 4 really important pillars. And one of those pillars is to ensure rapid, robust, and responsive technology evaluation to support the innovative landscape. And that's really important. So the focus at NICE is to do its work in an agile way, in a responsive way, to be flexible increasingly, but ultimately always to be robust and to maintain a high level of quality in terms of producing evidence-based recommendations for the system and for clinicians.
Excellent. So we've got a question here about if the MHRA requirements will replace NICE. Has there been any discussion around that?
The MHRA and NICE are 2 very different organizations with different roles, but complementary roles. And I think what we've all discovered over the last year or 2, and of course I've worked with both for quite some time, is that the roles of NICE and MHRA are different, but there is a continuum between them. And I think the 2 organizations are getting closer and closer together. And we'll be talking shortly perhaps about a number of initiatives that are in place and have been recently started to try and promote innovation and accelerate processes within the UK healthcare system. And most of those are founded around a really close collaboration between MHRA and NICE. So on the one hand, MHRA very much looking at the kind of regulatory aspects in terms of licensing, in terms of post-market surveillance, safety, decision making around risk assessments. NICE more to do with the next stage on that process of getting innovation to patients. In other words, around defining evidence to support efficacy, around cost effectiveness, about decision making, about what should or shouldn't be offered within the system. I'm sure that Graeme will add to that, but I don't think there's any suggestion that the organizations can replace each other in any shape or form, but there's no doubt at all within our system that we can work much more closely together.
Excellent. And maybe just kind of piggybacking on that, Peter, can you elaborate on some of the initial initiatives that have come out earlier this year that you mentioned?
Yes, and from a medical device perspective, there are 2 or 3 things that perhaps people will look out for. The first, actually, the innovative licensing and access pathway is something I know Graeme will be able to speak to this as well, because this is something that was initially developed for medicines and now is being contemplated and considered and explored for medical devices. So I think it's worth just highlighting that pathway that started, as I say, with a medicines initiative released earlier this year. And the initiative is a collaboration again between MHRA, NICE, and in fact the Scottish Medicines Consortium with supporting partners from NHS England and the Health Research Authority. And the concepts really are around identifying products in specific areas that may be, for example, used to treat life-threatening diseases or debilitating conditions, rare diseases, special patient populations, and sometimes those aligned to UK public health initiatives. So around medicines, defining those, assigning them then with innovation passports, followed then by establishing a target development profile that in a sense roadmaps the process through the regulatory features around the pitfalls perhaps that may fall in the way, where there is new evidence generation that's needed, and perhaps even around the considerations of implementation, commercial and managed access, etc. So that's an initiative for medicines that was initiated earlier this year. Both our organizations are now talking about how we can perhaps extend that to medical devices in the relatively near future. That's something that we're exploring, but is not yet part of a definitive executive kind of strategic planning. And then there are other considerations downstream as to what the mechanisms might be, for example, to support the managed access and the reimbursement implications of that. Again, another project ongoing that will inform that, and there may well be the convergence of those 2. I think that's one thing, therefore, just to kind of watch this space. I would also want to highlight the MedTech funding mandate which was initiated and started on the 1st of April of this year, so really fresh in the minds of everybody within our healthcare system at the moment. And again, that's a collaboration, but essentially has been launched by the Accelerated Access Collaborative run by NHS England. And again, that is there to promote innovation, but also remove the financial and procurement barriers to getting worthy technologies to patients more quickly. And that's involving a very important collaboration with NICE. So NICE is fundamental to that, because the assessment of what products may be suitable for the funding mandate is all based around NICE having published positive recommendations and guidance, so either coming from medical technology guidance or diagnostic guidance. But additional criteria, guidance to support clinical effectiveness, yes, but also evidence to support potential cost savings to the UK healthcare system. The round for 2021-22 has identified 4 technologies that qualify for the current criteria, one of which is a diagnostic technology, 3 of which are medical device interventional technologies. And there will be a round every year. The criteria will be reviewed on a year-to-year basis. But once a funding mandate is achieved, then that has massive implications potentially for market access. The technology becomes available on the NHS supply chain. The providers, so this is for NHS providers, have the opportunity of reimbursement of the cost of the technology directly from their commissioners. So that's the way in which the system will work. And for each technology, NICE produces a package of tools to support adoption and implementation. So again, that's something I think people should be very aware of as a new initiative to promote adoption of innovative technologies within our system.
Great, thanks, Peter. So I've got a question here that actually I would like to present to all of the panelists, because I think you bring different perspectives in terms of how you may answer this. So with the potential additional burden to medical device companies, are you worried that there may be less devices available in the UK when the UKCA requirements are in place?
I'm happy to go first on that one. I think the answer to that is we wouldn't have done a very good job if we end up in the UK system not being sufficiently attractive to allow companies to continue to think that the UK is a place where they want to place the products on the market. I had a conversation yesterday with a trade association in the UK, and they came up with the term commodity products. And so I quite like the idea that for a large majority of products, the role of the MHRA is just to make sure that they can get their way onto the market in the UK, into the healthcare system, to patients and consumers, because they're all relatively straightforward, they're relatively low risk. Where we'll want to be focusing our efforts will be around, okay, where are the products where either we think they are sufficiently high risk that we want to take an extra look at them on top of what, say, the notified body or the FDA might have done, or where are the products where we might be able to do something in terms of speeding access. Where can we identify pathways that... Sorry, that was the interruption I was expecting. Where can we identify the product areas where we think that the MHRA can actually make it easier, we can make the route to market clearer, can sort out regulation in some of the areas where we don't think the regulation works terribly well internationally. I think one of the really interesting areas that we're looking at is around the regulation of software, digital tech, where lots of countries globally are grappling with this. I don't think anyone's got to grips with it. And I think if we can set out a UK route to market that is actually fit for purpose, that speeds product to market in a way that gives patients certainty that the products are good quality, and gives companies the ability to get products out there early, to get good quality data back to support their ongoing use and perhaps use elsewhere in the world, I think that's a win-win really, and that's where we're looking to get to.
Great, thanks, Graeme. Peter, what are your thoughts on that?
To be honest, I don't have a lot to add to what Graeme has said. I think that's from the perspective of a regulator, that's as good as you're going to get in terms of a response. I see great opportunities ahead potentially for our system to be able to kind of promote innovation. Obviously, there are some kind of details, as Graeme's talked about eloquently, to be worked out along the regulatory pathway, but some real opportunities. And Graeme touched on AI. That there's an initiative that's just in early planning stage for a multi-agency advice service that I think offers great opportunities for those who are developing and innovating in the AI space to receive really expert advice as to how they should go about that process, to offer real opportunities within the UK system for how they plan their research and development, and plan how they can implement and adopt within a system such as ours new initiatives around the AI space. Again, essentially going to be a collaborative initiative between different elements, four different organisations: NICE, MHRA, Care Quality Commission, and Health Research Authority, but ultimately the provision of a service that's going to make it so much easier for innovators to understand how they can get into our market and get through the regulatory hurdles, and get through the HTA assessment and into clinical adoption. So I think we've got great opportunities ahead through that. And incidentally, with that particular initiative, I know that the Secretariat for that's going to sit with NICE, and my colleagues are very eager to know about anybody who's innovating in the AI space who may want to be involved in a pilot of that service in the early part of next year. I think they anticipate that by March 2022, that multi-agency advice service is going to be up and running. So if there's anybody out there who wants to perhaps have a product that they want to be involved in that kind of pilot service, or if they want to help in the development of the planning of the service, then do let us know, and I can put you in touch with the people that are leading on this within NICE at the moment.
Great, thanks, Peter. And so that's, I think, a great segue. So Graeme, can you elaborate a bit more on the direction of the UK regulation on software as a medical device?
Yeah, of course, and I can pick up. There's a separate question there as well around different approaches to combination devices and digital therapies. So maybe I'll cover that one as well. So I think I'll deal with the combination one first, because it's quite an interesting one. I'm really glad someone's asked that, actually, because I should have mentioned it. I think if you look at the way the EU system works with combination products, you've got this very clunky approach whereby, well, it depends if your combination product is predominantly a device or predominantly a medicine, in which case you speak to that particular organization first. They will do an initial assessment. They'll then send a dossier over to them who've got 210 days to do this. Who'll send it back and you'll get a review. Like the MHRA, we want to sweep all that thing to one side. What we want to be able to say is that you worry about, we'll have a single front door, you come to that front door with your product, we'll do all that stuff in the background. And the joy and the beauty of what the MHRA will be able to offer in the UK is this seamless review that will go on behind the doors, because within the MHRA we'll have medical device and medicines expertise all under one roof. That will all come together, and companies should see a very, very different experience. I think it's a real area of opportunity. The digital tech and software space is one where how do I think we're going to approach it? Well, I think the MDR gives us quite a good yardstick on how not to approach it, because I don't think that in the MDR, I don't think they've done a terribly good job of interpreting what's been done at an international level and kind of understanding how that really works in practice. So I think we'll be looking to reflect more on the work that the IMDF has done around, for example, classification and categorization of products. So look to be a bit more risk-based in that sense. I think we're going to look hard at certain aspects around, particularly, Peter mentioned AI, but product development. How can we be a bit smarter when it comes to allowing products to develop, to change, to iterate in a time period that just doesn't fit with the traditional notified body, conform assessment body model? So how can we be a bit smarter about that? And we're now having regular conversations with the FDA team on this, and we're looking to learn from the pilot that they did, because I think there's some interesting learning there. But I think they're also struggling to say, well, how can we take the pilot that we've done and actually get that into practice? So we're looking to draw on these different elements and put something together that still has at its core the key elements of medical device regulation, because we think that's appropriate. But I think there are some things that can work a bit better with software. But watch this space. There's hopefully going to be some things coming out on this in the next few months. I think just the other thing about software is that we're pretty lucky in the UK in that we've, in the last year or so, an organisation called NHSX has been established, and they are there to set out a digital strategy for the NHS as a whole, and they're doing a lot of coordinating work. So the multi-agency advice service that Peter spoke about is being funded through NHSX, and they're saying we want to break down barriers. And again, it's this notion that you shouldn't have to, as a company coming to the UK, and we know coming to any country, the first thing you do is go, right, who do I need to speak to about this? And you go down a few kind of blind alleys, and you eventually find someone that helps you, and you get somewhere. We'd like that not to be the case, and ideally this notion of a single front door is really one that I think we can help with. And software and AI is a particular challenge because you've got so many different players involved. You've got NHS Digital worried about deployment into the health service. You've got Care Quality Commission if it's part of a service, and it's about saying, right, don't worry about that. We'll do that in the background. You come speak to us, and you'll get some consolidated, clear advice. So it's about saying, not the other aspect of software I would highlight is about seeing regulation not as a product regulation, but as part of that broader healthcare sphere. That's really, that I think is going to be quite a defining feature.
Great, thanks, Graeme. So we've got a few additional questions here related to the transition process. And so is there a possibility for CE marking cutoff to move out to 2024 to align with the MDR?
Possibly. That's too far ahead. I think the important point on that is that we'll be running a consultation later this year that will say, here's what the UK system, here's what we plan it to look like, here's what we plan to do on these timescales, and we'll be seeking feedback on that. And some of the really important things that we'll be seeking feedback on is some of the big strategic questions, but also some of the very practical questions that say, what does a transition to a new UK system look like? What are reasonable and sensible timescales, taking into account what I said before? The last thing that I want to happen is to set up an all singing, all dancing UK system that everyone says is brilliant, and then all falls apart because people can't update their labels in time. That's kind of crazy, and that's not where we're going to be. So whilst I can't give you a definitive answer, what I can give you is a commitment to say that we will listen, and we'll make sure that what we're doing is sensible and proportionate and takes into account the bottom line, which is what is important to do for patient safety, which is what we're all here for.
Okay, great. And so another question just related to the process. So for completely new products that have never been brought to market in the EU, they are perhaps cleared in other countries. Just to confirm, there will be no formal review process by the MHRA, correct? It would all go through the approved bodies?
So for the next, until July 2023, for a product to come onto the UK, they have to have either a CE mark or a UKCA Mark. So that question, the product is going to get a CE mark under the MDR later in the year. And so they would then need to be registered and have that UK responsible person to come onto the market in the UK. What the situation is going to be after July 2023 is yet to be set out, the level of detail. So what we will want to do is we'll want to be taking an approach that differentiates the level of scrutiny that we put on a product based on a number of factors. That will include, where has the product already got regulatory approval? What can we rely on in terms of what other trusted regulators have done with the product? It will take into account the risk of the product. Do we think that is something that there is worthy of additional scrutiny by MHRA? In some cases, we might say, and going back to some conversation we've been having around kind of innovation, is around how can we say, right, this is a really important product that we've identified there is a really important clinical need for. How can we speed a route to market to this? How can we get it onto the market quicker in the UK, and work with companies to put in place the mechanism processes to make sure that we're tracking ongoing performance and making sure that we actually get a real world understanding of how that product's working. So I think the answer is it's going to be horses for courses. But what the MHRA is not going to do is reproduce reams and reams of its own legislation and redo everyone's work, because that's not, again, boiling it down, that's not in patients' best interests.
Great. So, obviously July 2023 is going to be an important date, but are there any other key deadlines that we as industry and other folks here in the US should be aware of as the UK rolls out its new regulatory framework?
So from my perspective, look out for a consultation that we're putting out, probably summer. We like to deal in seasons because it avoids us putting firm dates on it. But I think kind of July, August is when you'll see this consultation come out from MHRA, and we'd encourage everyone and anyone who's got an interest in this to feed back to us, even if it's only 2 or 3 lines. Make your voice heard. Then obviously over the course of this year, I mentioned earlier that the need to register products in a risk-based process. So by the end of this year, all products should be registered with the MHRA. So I guess the end of this year is that key deadline. And then I think in let's say the first quarter of next year is when we'll come out with those firm proposals of saying, here's what the new system looks like, and here's what you have to do. So early next year is when companies will get that degree more certainty over what they need to do by when.
Okay, great. So we've got another question here from the audience. So do the UK regulations have a carve out for laboratory developed tests? For example, that a single laboratory performing a test they developed would not need a CA mark?
So we currently have that under the existing directives that are in the UK laws, and we call that the in-house exemption. The MDR and the IVDR in Europe developed that into a bit of a broader framework under something called the health institution exemption. We did a lot of work on the health institution exemption, and we think that what was being proposed at the European level is actually a pretty sensible thing, which is to say that in the instance described in a institution developing a product for its own patients, that you don't need to throw the regulatory rulebook at it, that you can find a risk-based and proportionate way of dealing with it. And so the answer is yes, and the answer is probably that a lot of what's in the MDR and IVDR is what we'll be looking to reflect in the UK rules going forward.
Okay, great. We've got one last question here from the participant. So how do you see mobile remote technologies being used for clinical studies to help maintain product approvals?
Crikey, that's a good question. I don't know, Peter, have you got any thoughts on the kind of the clinical great clinical outcomes question?
And the focus of the question, just remind me, Megan, is that around the kind of regulatory aspects or around the kind of developing of clinically orientated research studies?
I think it would be the way that I interpret it is how those technologies that are being used in current clinical studies right now can help either maintain in a post-market product approval setting or potentially bringing new products to market.
I think that's one for you, Graeme.
Okay. Sorry, that's what we call a hospital pass. We're busy trying to work out what the question is trying to get at. So I think maybe this kind of tries to draw on some of the things that we've been speaking about, and I'll answer it in a general way. The overall approach that we're looking to get to in the UK is one whereby companies have absolute clarity and certainty on what they need to do to get a product through from early stage clinical studies, developing early evidence, and so that at that stage they can understand what does the product pathway look like that generates a clinical data over the lifetime of the product that gets me through regulatory approval and then through to make sure that I can get someone to actually buy my product and get it used in the NHS. And if it's proven to be a good product, how can that innovation be disseminated widely? So what we want to do is we want to get to that position whereby we can make that pathway absolutely clear to anyone, so that in early stages, you can come talk to the MHRA, you can talk to NICE, you can talk to anyone involved in that, so you get that early advice, and so that the clinical evidence base continues to develop over time, and actually kind of by accident, as you develop that clinical evidence base, oh look, I've got over the regulatory approval hurdle that I need to get over, and then by accident, but not by accident, but completely by design, you've also got through the additional evidence that you'd need to produce the efficacy and cost effectiveness question. So I guess I'm not sure if I've directly answered the question, but that's the landscape that we want to get to in the UK. And when it's operating well, that will make the UK a really, really attractive place to bring innovation, to bring new products, because you'll be able to have that evidence generation kind of launch pad, if you like, that will be very attractive, that will be supported, that will use everything the NHS has got in terms of lots of good quality data, ability to track products in use, and allow companies to generate that evidence that will allow them to get products into jurisdictions elsewhere in the world.
Great, thank you, Graeme. So we've got one question here that's come in. So what is MHRA's position on accepting clinical data generated from 100% virtual clinical trials in a submission?
The answer is we don't have a position on that. And the answer is because I never like giving, regulators never like giving answers to theoretical questions. We don't like giving to answers to questions if we can avoid it. I think the answer is, and I guess when you work in medical, in the world of medical devices, you're used to practically every clinical trial that we see is a novel clinical trial. It has to work in a slightly different way. You know, we operate in a very different world to medicines. We're used to seeing weird and wonderful studies. The answer is a clinical investigation should be designed to answer a particular question about a product. And the clinical investigation, as long as it can generate evidence that answers the question effectively, the kind of the gap analysis between what do we know and what do we need to know, then if it's generating that data, then that will be sufficient to get it through. Equally, you know, there'll be times when that is entirely appropriate. There'll be times when that's entirely inappropriate. But I would never say never. And if this is something that is something that a company can explain and can justify, then arguably you can say, well, it's a very creative way of answering a particular question, but I'm not going to give a dead definitive yes, no, maybe answer. No, I'll give a maybe is what I'll give. Maybe.
I think that's fair. So, Peter, I have one last question for you. So, how can industry help in assisting the UK with its innovation efforts?
Well, I think engagement is important. Early engagement with our system is going to be fundamental, so that we know what is out there and what is happening within innovation and industry. So I would just like to highlight, for example, the digital platform that exists now, Health Tech Connect, which was set up by NICE and a number of partners, sponsored by NHS England. Shortly, that's going to be migrating towards the Accelerated Access Collaborative. But it's just a way of industry and innovators registering with the UK system the products they have, the technologies they have, and that alerts to each of the partners within the system the possibility of working with them in some shape or form. So if for example, it was NICE would be looking for opportunities for innovative products on which to base evidence-based recommendation and guidance. There may be interactions with the academic health science networks for adoption implementation if it's further downstream. So this is just a way of alerting the UK system to the availability and the interest of industry and manufacturers as to what they have and what's out there, so that we know who to work with and what perhaps needs to be done for individual products. But the intention of NICE is really to kind of make sure that early engagement is the name of the game, and accessibility is going to be really important. So, for example, there is a scientific advice service that we have available, which is a joint offering actually with MHRA. So we would encourage innovators to actually engage with accepting and receiving scientific advice from the two organizations, either individually or collectively, to talk about, well, how can the evidence gaps be filled to satisfy if it's a regulatory requirement, perhaps, or if it's a question around health technology assessment, how can those evidence gaps be filled? How can the research program be developed in a way that's going to facilitate that rapid transition through the UK system? So think about engaging with our scientific advice service and just make yourself aware to us through Health Tech Connect.
Great, thanks, Peter. And Graeme, kind of an analogous question on your end, you know, how can industry help on the regulation side of things? Is there a way or a pathway for industry to get more involved?
So keep your eye out for the consultation that we'll be running. Part of the reason why I really enjoyed coming in and doing these kind of events is because it's an opportunity for me to convey some key messages and also to kind of to hear back to validate what we're hearing. So I think the consultation process is a really good way for people to get involved. We've got in the UK, we've got an innovation office in the MHRA. So if you've got a specific question about a specific product, then come and speak to our innovation office. And that's a very clear front door. We encourage people to come to it. So if you've got, you know, those kind of questions, oh, I've got this, I'm not sure how to go about that, then come and speak to us. Yeah, I guess watch this space. You know, sign up for web alerts. We try and do as much as we can through the gov.uk website, and keep in, you know, keep on top of that. Really, there's gonna be lots coming through over the next year. But hopefully you'll see it going in the direction that Peter and I just described, and one in which we can make sure that the UK is a great place to come and do business.
Excellent. And so I think maybe in closing, our last question is, you know, if the Medical Alley members have specific questions, where is the best place for them to go to get their questions answered, at least as a starting point?
Kind of regulatory questions, or kind of broader questions?
I would say, I think probably, you know, regulatory for you, Graeme, if somebody has questions, is to walk through the process. And then same thing, Peter, on your end from an innovation side, I know you mentioned a few options, but, you know, is there a direct person or a direct email, helpline, any specifics, that guidance that you could give the viewers?
Yeah, so I think everyone's always welcome to email me. I mean, you know, you can find me, and I'll find it, flick on someone. The best way would be, we have a mailbox, and maybe off the back of this, Megan, we can circulate that and with our kind of key page in order to get that in. Since Brexit and since everything's happened, we've deal with hundreds of queries a month through it, so we're quite used to dealing with difficult and complicated questions, and we get back to people within a couple of weeks or so normally. So that would be my route, and like I said, we'll put those details through maybe offline.
Okay, super. Peter, anything you'd want to add?
I from a NICE perspective, NICE has an office for market access, so I think they are a very useful first port of call. And as Graeme was mentioning, we can circulate specific emails after the event to those who've participated and joined. The Scientific Advice Service is part of the Office for Market Access, so again, that would be a good point of initiation. And the Accelerated Access Collaborative, please don't forget that. That really is the umbrella really that has been developed over a number of years now, well established under the chairmanship of Lord Darcy. That's had an increase in its remit over the last year or so. They really are the umbrella really for the UK innovation system in totality. So accessing their many potential services could be a good thing for people to consider. So I'm sure we can kind of provide the email address for people to access the AAC as well.
Great, thanks. So with that, we are out of time for today's session. So again, a special thanks to our panelists for a great session today. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Frank for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Graeme, Peter, and Alan as well. That was a fantastic discussion. I really appreciate you taking the time to share this important information. A reminder to all of our attendees, this was recorded. It'll be made available afterwards so you can review it or share it. And please, if you have ideas for future content or things we should be covering, reach out to anyone at the Medical Alley Association. And if your company is thinking about investing in or growing in the UK, reach out and we'll get you in touch with Jan and the team at the UK Government Office who can assist you. Thank you and have a great Friday. Bye, folks.